In 1897, a 24-year-old chemist walked into a small canning factory in Camden, New Jersey, with an idea that would change American cooking forever: Campbell's Soup. His name was John T. Dorrance. He had a degree from MIT and a doctorate in organic chemistry from Germany, and he'd get paid $7.50 a week. Within 2 years, he'd created a product that would become one of the most recognized symbols in the world. More familiar than most flags, more iconic than most presidents. This wasn't just soup. This was the infrastructure of American domestic life. The silent partner in 10 million kitchens. The thing that turned any woman, working or not, experienced or not, wealthy or not, into someone who could put a hot meal on the table in 5 minutes. For nearly a century, Campbell's Soup didn't just sell a product. It sold a lifestyle, an identity, a vision of what America should be. And for 3 generations, Americans bought it, literally and culturally. The company became so successful at embedding itself into American life that it transcended commerce entirely. The story of Campbell's isn't about rise and fall. It's about something more complicated and more profound. It's about how one company became so embedded in American culture that it stopped being a brand and became a symbol. How it shaped what families ate, how women cooked, what holidays looked like, and what suburban life meant. How it became so normal that it became invisible. This is the story of how Campbell's Soup built suburban America. Chapter 1. The Preserve Company. The company that would become Campbell's Soup started in 1869 in a small canning factory in Camden, New Jersey. Abraham Anderson, an icebox manufacturer, opened the operation. That same year, Joseph Campbell, a fruit merchant from Bridgeton, New Jersey, became Anderson's partner. They called it Anderson and Campbell. The initial investment was $400. $400 for canning equipment and ingredients. They produced canned tomatoes, vegetables, jellies, condiments, and minced meats. 3 specific products defined their early catalog: French peas, fancy asparagus, and beefsteak tomatoes. It was a modest operation in a city. Camden sat on the Delaware River, a manufacturing hub with dozens of small canneries competing for the same customers. Nothing about Anderson and Campbell suggested it would become anything remarkable. In 1876, Anderson left the partnership. Campbell bought out his share and renamed the company Joseph Campbell Preserve Company. For the next 20 years, the business grew slowly. Campbell added partners: his son-in-law Walter Spackman, his nephew Joseph S. Campbell, and a man named Arthur Dorrance, who brought a much-needed cash infusion. In 1882, the company was renamed Joseph Campbell Preserving Company. In 1891, it became Joseph Campbell Preserve Company again. The constant changes in name reflected changes in ownership and partnerships, but not changes in product or strategy. The company was still canning vegetables, fruits, and preserves, still competing with dozens of other small canneries along the Delaware River. Still unremarkable. They were making money, but they weren't making history. In 1894, Arthur Dorrance became president. Joseph Campbell retired that same year, though he remained involved until his death in 1900. And in 1897, Arthur Dorrance made a decision that would change everything. He hired his nephew, John Thompson Dorrance, as a chemist. It was a family favor that would transform American food. Chapter 2. The Condensed Revolution. In 1897, most soup sold in America was ready to eat. Full cans, heavy cans, expensive to ship, expensive to store, expensive to buy. A single can of soup could cost 30 cents, more than a pound of beef, more than a day's wages for many workers. Soup wasn't a staple. It was a luxury item. And for most American families, that meant it wasn't something they bought regularly. The soup market was dominated by a few companies producing heavy, ready-to-eat soups in large cans. The weight made shipping expensive. The size made storage difficult. And the price made it prohibitive for working-class families. Soup was something you made at home, from scratch using bones and vegetables and hours of simmering. Or you went without. John Dorrance looked at that problem and saw a simple solution. What if you could remove the water? Soup is mostly water, often 80 to 90% water. Water is heavy. Water is expensive to transport. But if you condensed the soup, reduced it by removing most of the water, you could ship it in smaller cans, charge less money, and still make a profit. It sounds obvious now, but in 1897, no one had figured out how to do it commercially. The challenge wasn't just removing water, it was doing it in a way that preserved flavor, maintained nutritional value, prevented spoilage, and could be scaled to industrial production. Dorrance spent months in the laboratory experimenting with different cooking temperatures, different preservation methods, different recipes. He tested batch after batch. He studied European food preservation techniques. He consulted with other chemists. By 1899, he had succeeded. He'd developed a commercially viable method for condensing soup. He reduced the water content by half. The cans shrank from large, bulky containers to small, manageable ones. The weight dropped dramatically. The shipping costs plummeted. And suddenly, Campbell's could sell soup at 1/3 the cost of competitors. The first condensed soups were tomato, consommé, vegetable, chicken, and oxtail. 5 varieties, sold for 10 cents a can. That was revolutionary. Soup had never been that affordable. A working-class family could now buy soup. A farm wife could stock her pantry. And because it was condensed, it didn't spoil quickly. Families could keep cans in the cupboard for months. The product sold immediately. By 1900, John Dorrance became a director of the company. In 1905, the company changed its name to Joseph Campbell Company, dropping preserve and acknowledging that soup had become their primary business. In 1914, John Dorrance became president, and in 1922 they made it official, Campbell Soup Company. The word soup was now part of their identity. Condensed soup had saved the company, and it was about to transform American cooking. Chapter 3: The Red and White Empire. In 1898, Campbell's introduced the design element that would make them iconic: the red and white label. The colors were inspired by Cornell University's football team. A Campbell's executive named Herberton Williams attended the annual Cornell Penn football game and was struck by the bold new red and white uniforms Cornell was wearing. He convinced the company to adopt those colors for their soup cans. The red and white label debuted in 1898. 2 years later, in 1900, Campbell's won a gold medal for product excellence at the Paris Exposition. The company added that medal to the label, a gold medallion that's still there today, more than 120 years later. And from that moment on, the design barely changed. The label was brilliantly simple: a tomato red top half with the word Campbell's written in white cursive script, similar to founder Joseph Campbell's own signature. A white bottom half with the soup variety in red block letters. Clean, recognizable, consistent. In an era when packaging design was chaotic and inconsistent, Campbell's stood out through simplicity. And it stayed that way. For over 100 years, the Campbell's soup can look almost identical. Same colors, same script, same medallion. That consistency wasn't an accident, it was strategy. Campbell's understood something fundamental about human psychology. Repetition builds recognition, and recognition builds trust. In a world where food safety was uncertain and brand loyalty was hard-earned, that red and white can become a symbol of reliability. In 1904, the company added another marketing stroke of genius: the Campbell Kids. Grace Drayton, a freelance illustrator known for drawing chubby children with round faces and wide-set eyes, created 2 rosy-cheeked toddlers to represent the brand. The Campbell Kids weren't just mascots, they were symbols of health, happiness, and wholesomeness. The kids appeared everywhere, in advertisements, on packaging, in magazines, on dolls, and they conveyed a powerful message to mothers. Campbell's Soup makes children healthy. It makes them strong. In an era when infant mortality was high and parents were terrified of food contamination, that message resonated deeply. The Campbell kids became one of the most recognized characters in American advertising. John Dorrance became president of Campbell Soup Company in 1914. He would lead until his death in 1930. During those 16 years, he transformed Campbell's from a regional canning company into a national institution. He believed in quality. He worked closely with chef Louis Charles Delisle, Campbell's first executive chef hired in 1902 to refine every recipe. He believed condensed soup should taste as good as homemade, maybe better. He also believed in supporting agriculture. Throughout the 1910s and 1920s, Dorrance and his wife Ethel hosted annual meetings for farmers at their home on Campbell's Research Farm in Cinnaminson, New Jersey. Campbell's agricultural experts taught farmers about crop rotation, water conservation, and seed selection. The company didn't just buy produce, they ensured quality by teaching farmers how to grow better crops. By 1910, Campbell's had achieved national distribution. By the 1920s, they were producing 21 varieties of condensed soup. In 1922, the company launched one of the most successful jingles in history. Mum, good. It was simple, memorable, and everywhere. On the radio, in print ads, in stores. The jingle became so embedded in American culture that people still remember it today. Chapter 4. Dominating American Kitchen. In 1931, Campbell's began sponsoring radio programming, starting with the Hollywood Hotel program on CBS. Later sponsorships included George Burns and Gracie Allen, Amos and Andy, and Edward R. Murrow with the news. The company understood that reaching families meant being in their homes. And in the 1930s and 40s, that meant being on the radio. Then came World War II, and Campbell's Soup became part of the war effort. The company produced rations for the military. Soup was portable, shelf-stable, and calorie-dense, perfect for soldiers in the field. Campbell's sent millions of cans to military bases and battlefields around the world. Back home, Campbell's advertising shifted to reflect wartime values. The Campbell kids were depicted as war bond salesmen and air raid wardens. In 1944, the company received an achievement award from the U.S. Department of War. But the war did something else that would prove even more significant. It trained a generation of women to rely on convenience foods. With husbands overseas and women working in factories producing planes, tanks, and ammunition, there was no time for elaborate meal preparation. Canned soup, canned vegetables, and shelf-stable products became essential. And when the war ended, those habits didn't disappear. They became the foundation of post-war American cooking. In 1948, Campbell opened test kitchens staffed by professionally trained home economists. Their job wasn't just to develop soup recipes. They were tasked with creating recipes that used Campbell's condensed soups as ingredients. Casseroles, sauces, complete meals. The idea was revolutionary. Condensed soup could be more than soup. It could be the base for an entire system of cooking. This wasn't just product development. This was cultural engineering. Campbell's was teaching American women a new way to cook. Faster, easier, more reliable than traditional methods, and crucially dependent on Campbell's products. The test kitchens became a laboratory for creating the modern American meal. In 1950, Campbell's began sponsoring television shows. The most notable were The Donna Reed Show and Lassie. Both shows depicted idealized suburban families, spotless homes, well-behaved children, mothers in aprons, fathers in suits, and Campbell's Soup in the kitchen cabinet. Print ads featured celebrities from these shows: Donna Reed, Johnny Carson, the cast of Lassie, reinforcing the company's sponsorship. Campbell's wasn't just advertising soup. They were advertising a lifestyle, a vision of what American families should look like. Chapter 5. Cultural Control. In 1955, a Campbell's test kitchen manager named Dorcas Riley created a recipe that would become one of the most iconic dishes in American history: green bean casserole. The recipe was devastatingly simple. 1 can of Campbell's cream of mushroom soup, half a cup of milk, a dash of soy sauce, 4 cups of cooked green beans, 1 1/3 cups of French fried onions. Mix the soup, milk, soy sauce, and beans. Pour into a casserole dish. Bake for 25 minutes at 350 degrees. Top with remaining onions. Bake 5 more minutes until golden brown. That was it. 6 ingredients, 30 minutes total. No culinary skill required. The recipe was created for a feature article for the Associated Press. The requirement was simple: create a quick and easy dish using ingredients most U.S. households kept on hand. It was originally called Green Bean Bake, and initially it didn't test well within the company. But Dorcas Riley persisted. She believed in the recipe's simplicity. Campbell's started printing the recipe on cream of mushroom soup can labels, and something extraordinary happened. The recipe spread, not through massive advertising campaigns, not through celebrity endorsements, through tradition. Mothers made it. Daughters learned it. Families served it at Thanksgiving. And it became quietly and completely part of American culture. By the 1960s, green bean casserole had become a Thanksgiving staple. Culinary historian Laura Shapiro later called the recipe's use of the crunchy fried onion topping a touch of genius that gave an otherwise ordinary dish a bit of glamour. Food and Wine called it iconic. Good Housekeeping said few dishes are as iconic as the green bean casserole. Today, Campbell's estimates the recipe is served in 20 million Thanksgiving dinners in the United States each year. 40% of all cream of mushroom soup sold in America goes into making green bean casserole. The recipe is viewed 4 million times on Campbell's website every single Thanksgiving day. According to Campbell's, it is the most popular recipe ever developed in their test kitchens. The genius of the recipe wasn't just that it was easy. It was that it required a Campbell's product. Every time someone made green bean casserole, they bought Campbell's soup. And because the recipe became a tradition, something families made every year, something passed down through generations, it created permanent, recurring demand. This was cultural control. Campbell's hadn't just sold a product. They'd embedded themselves into American holiday traditions. They'd created a ritual, and rituals are nearly impossible to break. Even today, when fresh ingredients and homemade sauces are fashionable, millions of families still make green bean casserole exactly as Dorcas Riley designed it in 1955. Because it's tradition, because their mothers made it, because their grandmothers made it, because Thanksgiving wouldn't feel right without it. By the 1950s and 60s, Campbell's had accomplished something extraordinary. They weren't just a soup company, they were infrastructure. The red and white can was as recognizable as the American flag. The Campbell kids were as familiar as Mickey Mouse. And Campbell's soup was in virtually every kitchen in suburban America. Chapter 6. The Soup Can as Art. In 1962, something unexpected happened that would cement Campbell's place in cultural history. On July 9th, a relatively unknown artist named Andy Warhol opened a small show at the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles. The subject? Campbell's Soup. Warhol had created 32 paintings, each depicting a different flavor of Campbell's condensed soup. Each canvas was 20 inches high and 16 inches wide, hand-painted using a projector to trace the outline, then carefully filled in. Identical in style, displayed on narrow shelves running the length of the gallery, arranged exactly like soup cans on a supermarket shelf. The show was uneventful at first. Few people attended. Warhol himself didn't even show up. A planned secondary showing in New York was canceled. But the work didn't disappear. It sparked conversation, debate, controversy. What was art? Could a painting of a soup can be art? Was Warhol mocking consumerism or celebrating it? Was he making fun of Campbell's or honoring it? Warhol's answer was characteristically simple. I used to drink it. I used to have the same lunch every day for 20 years. For him, Campbell's Soup was the quintessential American product. It was everywhere. It tasted the same whether you were rich or poor. And it was so familiar that most people didn't even think about it anymore. It was just there, part of the landscape, invisible through ubiquity. That was Warhol's point. Campbell's Soup had become so embedded in American culture that it had stopped being a product and become a symbol. It represented mass production, consumer culture, and American identity all at once. And by painting it, by forcing people to look at it again, really look at it, Warhol made them recognize how ubiquitous it had become, how much power it held, how it had shaped what normal meant. Initially, Campbell's executives were uncertain how to respond. Company president William Beverly Murphy expressed concern. The company took a wait-and-see approach, but quickly they became supporters. They sent Warhol cases of Campbell's condensed tomato soup. They commissioned 2 paintings from him. They established the Andy Warhol Scholarship Fund with the New York Art Academy. And in doing so, Campbell's embraced something remarkable. The soup can wasn't just packaging anymore. It was art. It was culture. It was iconic. Warhol's paintings elevated Campbell's from a brand to a cultural institution. In 1996, the Museum of Modern Art bought all 32 paintings from Irving Bloom as a combination gift, and sale valued upwards of $15 million, a jaw-dropping return on his $1,000 investment in 1962. Today, when people visit Andy Warhol's grave in Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, they don't leave flowers. They leave stacks of Campbell's soup cans. That's the legacy. A product so embedded in culture that it transcends commerce and becomes memory, nostalgia, and art. Chapter 7. The Decline of Convenience. But even as Campbell's reached the height of cultural influence, the market was changing. In the 1970s, canned soup consumption began to decline for the first time in the company's history. Families were eating out more. Fast food restaurants proliferated. Microwaves replaced stovetops. And a new generation of consumers started questioning the convenience foods their parents had embraced. The health food movement emerged. Organic produce became fashionable. Whole foods opened. Processed foods, once seen as modern and convenient, started to be viewed with suspicion. Campbell's Soup, with its high sodium content and preservatives, was no longer the symbol of progress. It became the symbol of everything wrong with industrial food. In 1980, Campbell's closed its Camden factory, one of the largest employers in the region. Hundreds of workers lost their jobs. The company headquarters remained in Camden, but production moved to facilities around the world. It was a cost-cutting measure, but it was also symbolic. The company that had defined American domestic life for a century was no longer rooted in the communities it had helped build. Campbell's tried to adapt. In 2009, the company announced it had lowered sodium content in 50% of its soup range. But in 2010, ABC News reported that the low-sodium variety contained the same amount of sodium as the regular variety, and Campbell's Healthy Request soup contained more fat than regular soup. In 2011, citing sinking sales, the company increased the salt content again. The experiment had failed. The company introduced new products: Campbell's Soup to Go, microwavable single-serving soups, Campbell's Select, ready-to-serve soups with easy-open pop-top lids, Campbell's Chunky, heartier soups marketed to men. In 1999, the labels were redesigned for the first time in over 100 years. The red and white remained, but the Campbell's script was smaller. Each can showed a steaming bowl of soup. It was a concession to modernity. But it was also an admission that the old label, unchanged for a century, was no longer enough. Campbell's also expanded through acquisitions. In 1955, They acquired C.A. Swanson and Sons, the frozen food company. In 1961, Pepperidge Farm. V8 in 1948, Pace Salsa in 1995, Snyder's Lance in 2018. By the 21st century, Campbell's was no longer just a soup company. They were a diversified food conglomerate. But soup remained their identity. Chapter 8. Legacy. The soup that built America. Today, Campbell's is still a major company. In fiscal year 2024, net sales reached $9.6 billion. Products are sold in 120 countries. In November 2024, the company officially rebranded as the Campbell's Company, dropping soup from its name for the first time in over a century. It was a signal. Soup is no longer the center of what they do, but the legacy remains everywhere you look. Walk into any American grocery store and you'll still see the red and white cans. Open any American cookbook and you'll find recipes calling for Campbell's cream of mushroom soup. Sit at any Thanksgiving table, and there's a good chance you'll see green bean casserole made exactly as Dorcas Riley designed it in 1955. Campbell's created more than products. They created habits, traditions, cultural touchstones. They taught 3 generations of Americans how to cook, what to buy, what a family meal should look like. And in doing so, they shaped suburban life in ways still visible today. The post-war suburban boom, the Levittowns, the ranch houses, the 2-car garages, was built on convenience. Washing machines, dishwashers, frozen dinners, and Campbell's soup. It was infrastructure that made suburban life possible. The thing that allowed women to manage households without servants, without help, without extended family nearby. Campbell's didn't create that world, but they made it function. They made it sustainable, and they made it feel normal. The story of Campbell's isn't a story of collapse. It's a story of cultural saturation. For nearly a century, Campbell's was so successful, so ubiquitous, so embedded in American life that they stopped being a company and became a symbol. And symbols don't collapse. They fade, slowly, quietly, replaced by new symbols, new habits, new ways of living. But the influence remains. Every time someone opens a can of soup without thinking about it, that's Campbell's legacy. Every time someone makes a casserole with cream of mushroom soup, that's Campbell's legacy. Every time someone sees a red and white can and immediately knows what it is without reading the label, that's Campbell's legacy. Andy Warhol understood this better than anyone. He didn't paint Campbell's soup because it was innovative or cutting edge. He painted it because it was ordinary, because it was everywhere, because it was so familiar, it had become invisible. And in making it visible again, in forcing people to see it as art, he revealed how deeply Campbell's had shaped American culture. That's the paradox. Campbell's greatest success was becoming so normal that people stopped noticing. And their greatest challenge has been remaining relevant in a world where normal keeps changing. The red and white can is still there, in grocery stores, in kitchen cabinets, in museum collections. It's still iconic, still recognizable, still Campbell's. But it's no longer the center of American life. It's a relic, a reminder, a piece of cultural memory. And maybe that's enough. Not every company gets to define an era. Not every product becomes a symbol. Not every brand gets turned into art. Campbell's did all 3. The soup that built suburban America is still on the shelf. So here's what I want to know. Do you still make green bean casserole every Thanksgiving? The real one, Campbell's cream of mushroom, French fried onions, exactly the way your mother made it? Did you grow up with those red and white cans in your kitchen? Do you remember the Campbell kids? Did your grandmother have a shelf full of Campbell's soup in the pantry? Maybe you worked at the Camden factory. Maybe your father did. Maybe you remember when they closed it. Or maybe you're one of the people who stopped buying Campbell's. And if you are, what replaced it? Leave a comment. I want to hear your Campbell's story.